योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं हरिः ओम्. So we are looking at Sutra 2.27. Tasya Saptada Pranta Bhumihi Prajna. We already have seen the 7 Pranta Bhumis of Prajna, and we saw that these 7 are the only 7 that can be the state of the Chitta at the time of Viveka Khyati, and no other state of the Chitta, no other Alambanam is recognized by Patanjali and Vyasa in this particular condition. And this Viveka Khyati is its function, or its role in the stage to Kaivalya is that of causing the bandha or bondage to go away, which then gives rise to Kaivalyam or Moksha. So we've seen all the 7, so we will not repeat those today. There were 1 or 2 lines of the Bhashya that were remaining. So first let's go over those. So after having seen the 7th one, which was about the guna sambandha, the samparka with the 3 gunas, or the conjunction or the relation with the 3 gunas going away as the 7th pranta bhumi of the prajna. Vyasa continues, he says, etam saptavidam pranta bhumi prajnam anupashyan purushah kushala ityakhyayate. So the Purusha, seeing these 7 pranta bhumis of the prajna, the 7 that we covered in the previous session, and the word once again is anupashyan. Anupashyan means the seer, his sight follows whatever is the state of the prajna, in the sense that it is what we have referred to earlier as the reflection or the echo, because that is the nature of Paurusheya Bodha of the Chitta. So the Purusha and the Chitta are in conjunction with each other. The Chitta is the seen, the Drishyam. The Purusha is the seer, the Drashta. But the seeing of the Purusha is not the worldly Laukika seeing. It is not happening through the Indriya Pranali. It is not happening through Indriyas. So it is seeing as it were, as we have referred to earlier. And the term Anupashyan refers to that. So whatever is the condition of the Chitta, that gets echoed or reflected with the Purusha, and Purusha lends consciousness onto the Chitta, and the Vishayas that are reflected in the Chitta gets reflected in the Purusha. So that is what the term Anupashyan, that is why it is chosen. So seeing this, so let's just call it seeing. So seeing this, these 7 Pranta Bhumis only, the Purusha is referred to or is known as the Kushala. So the term, Vyasa is introducing the term Kushala Purusha in this case with a very, very specific meaning. He says if the whatever is seen, quote unquote seen by the Purusha is one of these 7 Pranta Bhumis, only then in that stage, the Purusha will be referred to as the Kushala Purusha. So that is what this line is saying. So that is when the Purusha in some sense has attained the Kushalata. So Kushala has several meanings. Kushala Kalyane. So Kalyana means Shubha, Mangala, and so on. So Kushala, it is in another sense it is used in terms of skilled. Okay, by being able to, like it is said, yoga karmasu kaushalam. So there, the kaushalam is kushalasya bhavaha kaushalam. So here, the kushala specifically is a term referred to where the purusha has attained a certain state, or the purusha and the chitta combination has attained a certain state, where the cognition or the cognitive imprint of the chitta is one of the seven pranta bhumis, and in that case the purusha is a kushala purusha, and that is the term that is used. Then the next line says pratiprasavepi chittasya muktah kushala ityeva bhavati gunatitatvad iti. So when the pratiprasava happens, which means the chitta, which is a certain evolute of the gunas. After all, it is starting from the pradhana, there is a mahat, ahankara, and so on, and there is a chitta, is like it's constituted of the gunas. That particular constitution fades away and dissolves back into the prakriti. So the effect is going back into the cause. So that is pratiprasava. And then the purusha becomes a kevali purusha, because it is kaivalyam. The purusha, the sanyoga with the chitta and the prakriti has gone away. So that state is pratiprasava. So pratiprasavepi chittasya. So whose pratiprasava? Chittasya pratiprasava. The chitta is the one that is going away and getting dissolved. Chittasya pratiprasavepi muktaha kushalaha ityeva bhavati gunatitatvat. At that state, the purusha is gunatita, in the sense that his conjunction with gunas is permanently ended. There is no longer any relations with the gunas. And at that time also, the term kushala continues to apply, and that is known as muktaha kushalaha, because he is mukta. The bandha has gone away. In the previous state, the bandha is about to go away, because the seven pranta bhumis are still being seen, so to speak, by the purusha because of the reflection or the echo phenomenon. Now the chitta itself has dissolved, so there is no question of the seven pranta bhumis of the prajna, and the term kushala is still used, and this is a muktaha kushalaha purushaha. So he is now completely liberated and is a kushala purusha. In some sense, an analogy is also drawn with the terms in certain texts. There is this notion in certain schools of jivana mukti and videha mukti and so on. So in that sense, the first one is a kushalata when the relationship with the chitta still exists, and is therefore in some sense a parallel to what might be referred to as jivana mukti. There are some subtleties and nuances there, and we won't get into that. In the second one, the chitta itself has dissolved, so the existence of chitta itself has ended, and the purusha still is a kushala purusha and the mukta kushala purusha. So with this, Vyasa concludes, and here what we have seen is a very detailed sort of a frame by frame picture of how the purusha prakriti sanyoga, which is in the worldly state, goes away and dissolves with certain very specific cognitive imprints of or prajna, which is reflected in the purusha, and then ends in mukti of the purusha, who then becomes muktaha kushalaha.
So what is to be noted here is that Vyasa is introducing us to a concept called Kushala Purushaha. Kushala Purushaha, Kushala. We should not, as Srini just now said, it's a technical term. It has specific meaning and not the popular meaning, because Kushala is also used in popular common man's parlance. That is such as skillful. The Kushala is used as skill. And as you said, it's also Kalyanam. That means one's well-being. But here it has a specific meaning, Kushala. So what is this specific meaning? The chitta has now dissolved, and it has gone into reversal merger into its causes. The first cause, which is pradhana. So now the chitta has lost its entity, identity. So that is the meaning of the word Kushala to be taken here. That it is, the Chitta is no longer there. If the Chitta is there, then the whole chain of cause, effects, sorrows, etc. would be coming up. So the Kushala means, that is one meaning. The second meaning is that he is Muktaha. That is also called as Jivana Mukta. That means there is no further reincarnation for this yogi. There is another meaning of the Kushala. That means there is no karma bandhana, there is no punarjanma, there is no reincarnation, there is no reappearance. So that is another meaning of the word Kushala. And also Jivan Mukta has that one meaning, which means he is now free from any Jivanam thereafter. Which means that there is not going to be any Punarjanma and reincarnation. So he is Mukta from Jivanam. Jivanam means coming into existence, taking birth and living the life and then dying. So from life to death is called Jivanam. Now that is not going to be there for him. So also he is Gunatitaha. So in case of a yogi here, the subtlety is to be understood that the Chitta is gone. With Saptada Pranta Bhumi Prajna, we were told that in the final, in the fourth stage of it, and that later part of it, that the Chitta reels down in a reverse merger with the Pradhana, Mula Prakriti. Like the boulder dislodged from the top of the mountain, it doesn't get replaced. There's no way that it can get back again over the mountain. So that is the meaning of Kushala here, specific meaning, that there is no reincarnation hereafter, there is no karma bhoga. Now the Chitta is gone. Now the word Jivan Mukti also comes in spiritual texts. It is because the Chitta is gone. But still, the embodiment, the physical body is still existing. And therefore that the word Kushala has come. Say for instance, the case such as Sri Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was understood to be Jivan Mukta, was understood to be Kushala. But yet the body was there. The Chitta is gone and now this body will go as scheduled with the end of the life. Until that time, whatever prarabdha bhoga will be taking place, but this yogi doesn't suffer from that. And that's why we get in the instance, the life of Ramana Maharshi, that he had some cancer. And the people wondered why he has cancer and why he is suffering. He was not suffering by all that because the Chitta itself had gone. So, therefore, he had no pain and pleasure, etc. And that was his, not his body as much as our body is our body. So, he was totally detached, dissociated from the body, although the body was lingering for it to be waiting for prarabdha kshaya. And when a prarabdha kshaya would be taking place, that would be end of life, that manifestation. So that's why there is a concept of Jivana Mukta. So also Gunatita. And now if you understand about Gunatita, there is a passage in Bhagavad Gita, Gunatita sa uchyate, Gunatita sa uchyate, Gunatita sa uchyate. So he's a living yogi who has a body, embodiment, like you and me. He has embodiment. But he doesn't have affiliation with the embodiment. He is not rooted into the embodiment just as you and me are. So that's why the Gunatita word also has been brought in. So for better comprehension of the word Gunatita, that means because the gunas have reeled down, Sattva Rajatama gunas have gone. So that's how a Jivan Mukta is also believed by some of the schools in Vedanta that it is a living embodiment until the last breath of that embodiment, but yet on a transcendent plane, Gunatita plane. So the chitta is gone. Now, after having the chitta gone, now the body will be going back in the process of pratiprasava. Because as long as the chitta is within the embodiment, that pratiprasava will not take place. Therefore, that something like the basic software must be gone. So once the chitta is gone, sattva rajatama gunas have gone. Now they don't have any functionality. They don't have adhikara. So they are charita adhikara, if you remember in the part of Bhashya. So yet the body will be there. Then what is that fate of the body? What is the condition of the body? It is guna atita and jiva mukta. So prarabdha kshaya will have to be taking place. That means that lifespan plan has to end. And when that ends, the physical embodiment, visible embodiment, grosser embodiment will also go into merger. So it should be understood here, Patanjali is mentioning the chitta gone, chitta reeling down into pratiprasava and going to primordial cause. But in the process of the 7 pranta bhumi, nowhere the body's dismantlement is not mentioned. The body would be dismantled duly. Like when the person is dead, we dispose the body, we don't retain the body when the death has taken place. So similarly here, the chitta is gone, but the body will be still there as an effect of because of the momentum of life. And when the momentum is gone with the prarabdha kshaya, end of the prarabdha, then that also would be going. And then the embodiment also will be going. So we do come across such mystic saints who are said to be Jivan Mukta, who are on a transcendent plane. They are not mortals like us, yet they have a body. That body will be going in due course. First the chitta has to go. It is not the process that the body should first go, and then the chitta will go. The substrate of this embodiment, the substratum of this embodiment, the chitta has to go, and that is what is mentioned in Saptadha Pranta Bhumi, Prajna. Having chitta having gone, in due course, the body will also go away. Like if there is a dry leaf on a tree, how long it is going to be attached to tree? Sooner or later it is going to fall off. Dry leaf will fall off. So similarly, this body will fall off in due course. However, it is important for chitta to go. One should not have a position like this. Let the body first go. And let chitta go finally. That won't be the process. That is not the process. So chitta going is important. The guna sambandha has going important. Now this will remain for a while, like a dry leaf is still on the tree there. Still, its stem is attached to the tree for a while, the bark for a while. But how long? It is going to certainly fall off, sooner or later. And with any slightest instrument, it is going to fall off. So with the death, what we call as brain fail and heart fail, that is going to take place. That embodiment, physical embodiment, is going to go away. Very important. First, chitta must go. The guna sambandha must go. Gunadhikara must go. You can't expect gunadhikara to go and then first body to go and then gunadhikara to go. So this is the process of mukti which one has to understand, and you will understand when we really deal with the Kaivalya in the 4th chapter, where Gunanam Pratiprasavaha is mentioned. But it is important to note here, the chitta should go first. If the chitta is still there and then sadhikara chitta is there, then there is no way the body will go. If it goes, it is going to come back, reappear in some form or the other, punarjanma, reincarnation. So first the reincarnation should be set aside. Without that being set aside, you can't get mukti and moksha. For mukti and moksha, we have seen the process in this sutra. So that has to happen first. the embodiment is still there. Like a person is dead, the body is still there. A mortal remains of a person, we say, mortal coils in the person. That will be disposed, that has to be disposed. That will be disposed even in any case. So this physical body will be disposed in any case. But don't expect that the first the body should go and then the chitta will go. It will not happen that way. So adhikar chitta must become charitadhikara. That is kushala purusha. That is the kaushalya. That is the kushalata here. Not the kushalata in the sense we understand in our common man's parlance. In the sense skill. This is not the skill. So also yoga karma so kaushalam. What is that kaushalam? That the karmas will never touch the yogi. Whether vices or virtues which are committed by the momentum of life, they don't touch him. That is why he kushala purusha, yoga karma so kaushalam. The yoga gives him that untouchability of any karma because of the momentum of life. When the momentum of life will end, that will end. So, point is, kushala purusha is a concept that should be pondered over and then try to crystallize what is it. And gunatita. Gunatita is the expression used by Vyasa here. So, gunatita can also be better understood by looking into those sets of verses which come in Bhagavad Gita. Gunatita darshanam. Okay?
Now the other thing about this sutra is that it enumerates 7 pranta bhumis of prajna in the state of viveka khyati, after which there will be kaivalya or moksha. What this also means is, because it is only these 7, the implication is that any liberation, any kaivalya or moksha necessarily reaches this state of yoga, the samadhi, the samprajnata samadhi of viveka khyati, and then the asamprajnata samadhi followed by kaivalya. And then there is the question of what about the other margas which are not like the jnana marga and so on, karma marga, jnana marga and so on. So here to liberation. So here the text is directly saying that all of those marga before the liberation necessarily have to go through yoga, and yoga is the only gateway to liberation. Why? Because the saptada pranta bhumi is the state before liberation, and that is the state of samadhi, and samadhi is yoga, as we saw in the very first chapter, very first sutra. So essentially yoga is an inevitable part of any mukti or liberation. So then
that is why karma marga culminates at what is called as karma yoga. Jnana marga culminates at a point what is called as jnana yoga. Karma marga culminates at a point which is called as yoga. And dhyana marga culminates at a point which is called as dhyana yoga. Yoga comes very well. So jnana marga, jnana yoga, karma marga, karma yoga, dhyana marga, dhyana yoga, bhakti marga, bhakti. Inevitable. You can't escape. So finally we have to come to that one gate from where the liberation is effected. Whatever might be the path, we have to come to that one final gate, which is the gate of yoga. There is no way that mukti, liberation, nirvana can take place without yoga. So this what Vyasa has mentioned is jnani, karma margi, bhakti margi as well, and not only for dhyana margi. Okay.
So while we are on the topic, I'll just mention some other beautiful lines from different texts that bring out this aspect of it, which is coming out clearly in this sutra, Tasya Saptada Pranta Bhumi Prajna, where we are saying that these 7 states of cognition, which is nothing but samadhi and yoga, are an inevitable part for liberation. So there is this other school that says that the certain lines of the Vedas like Tattvamasi and so on. Just hearing that itself and knowing the meaning is sufficient to bring about liberation. So jnana itself is the cause of liberation, and that alone is enough. So that objection is raised. It's a nanu tatapi kimartham yoga prayasaha. So if hearing that line alone and understanding the meaning is sufficient, then why go through all this difficult path of yoga where so many things have to be learned, tried, so much abhyasa is required? Why is all that required? When Shruti Janya Atma Matra Satya Bodhe Naiva Sambhavat. So if mukti is coming merely by Shruti Janya Atma Matra Satya Bodhe Naiva. From the Shruti, by listening to the Shruti, by reading the Shruti, by understanding, Atma Matra Satya, Atma alone is Satya. That understanding, Bodha, Atma Matra Satya Bodhena Eva Sambhavat. If it is only possible by the understanding of Atma Matra Satya, Atma alone is Satya, which comes from Shruti, and if that is the only way for liberation, that jnana, then why all this yoga prayasaha? Nanu tata kimartham yoga prayasa? That is the question. So in that context, there are some beautiful lines in different texts. So there is one Shiva Parvati Samvadaha, where Shiva and Parvati are talking to each other. And Parvati asks, he says, Jnanadeva hi moksham cha vadanti jnaninas sada. Sakatam siddha yogena yoga kim mokshado bhavet. She is asking, Parvati asks Shiva, Jnanadeva hi moksham cha. From jnana alone you get moksha or liberation. Vadanti jnaninas sada. The jnanis are always saying this, that from jnana alone you get moksha. In that case, katam siddha yogena yoga kim mokshado bhavet. Then how come from yoga is it going to be the one that is going to give moksha? He asks this question to Shiva. Now Shiva gives a beautiful answer there. Ishvara uvacha. He says, Jnane naiva hi moksho hi tesham vakyam tu nanyatha. He says, yes, from jnana alone there is moksha. Their sentence or their speech is not incorrect. Jnane naiva hi moksho hi tesham vakyam tu nanyatha. Sarve vadanti khadgena jayo bhavati tarhi kim. Everyone says that through the sword, by means of the sword, you get victory. And therefore what? Says Shiva. Sarve vadanti khadgena jayo bhavati tarhi kim. Then he says, Vina yuddhena viryena katam jayam avapnuyat tatha yogena rahitam jnanam mokshayano bhavet. He says, okay, everyone says through the sword you gain victory, and that is true. But without yuddha, without a battle, without virya, without courage, how are you going to gain any victory? Katam jayam avapnuyat. In a similar way, yogena rahitam jnanam. If there is jnana without any yoga, where are you going to get this moksha? So that is how he beautifully answers Parvati's question. He is essentially saying that jnana is the sword, but the yoga is the battle and the courage. And without that, how are you going to get any moksha or victory, jaya? I'll mention a few other lines which are very nice. In the Skanda Puranam it is said, Atma jnanena mukti syat taccha yogadritena hi sacha yogaschiram kalam abhyasadeva siddhyati. Again it says, Atma jnanena mukti syat. So yes, from the knowledge of the Atma, which we have seen here, it is Viveka Khyati, Purusha Khyati and so on. Taccha yogadritena hi. However, that is not possible without yoga. And what about the yoga? Sacha yoga chiram kalam. This yoga for a long time. Abhyasadeva siddhyati. So you need a long abhyasa, after which you are going to get the yoga. And without that yoga, there is no mukti. Then another one, which is Jnananishto viraktopi dharmagnopi jitendriyah vina yogena devopi na moksham labhate priye. Again, this is Shiva saying it. So this is covering the various paths. This is Jnananishta. Let somebody be Jnananishta. Jnananishto viraktopi. Or somebody be virakta, renunciate, one with complete vairagya. So let him be a Jnananishta, let somebody be a virakta. Dharmagnopi jitendriya. One who is in the karma marga, who understands dharma perfectly, dharmagnya. Who is also a jitendriya, who has complete control over his senses. Vina yogena devopi. Without yoga, even a deva, even somebody Jnananishta, virakta, dharmagnya, jitendriya, deva, but without yoga, vina yogena devopi na moksham labhate priye. So Shiva tells Parvati, without yoga, there is no moksha, even for one who may be endowed with those other various powers and qualities, and even he himself, even if he is a god. But without yoga, there is no moksha. Which, in technical terms, in the sutra text, that is coming from Tasya Saptada Pranta Bhumis Prajna. There's another from one of the Upanishads. It says, this brings in a very interesting, different angle. It says, Janmantareischa bahubir yogo jnanena labhyate jnanam tu janmanaikena yoga deva prajayate tasmad yogat parataro nasti margastu mokshadaha pravicarya chiram jnanam mukto ham iti manyate kim asau mananadeva mukto bhavati tatchanat. So essentially it is saying, after several janmas, after several lifetimes of jnana, several lifetimes of having jnana, only after that one attains yoga. Janmantarescha bahubir yogo jnanena labhyate. Jnanam tu janmana ekena yoga deva prajayate. But however, for one who has this yoga, jnana comes in that lifetime itself, in one lifetime itself. So from jnana to yoga is a journey of several lifetimes. From yoga to jnana happens in the same lifetime. Tasmad yogat parataro nasti margastu mokshadaha. Therefore, there is no other path that is greater than yoga for moksha. Pravicharya chiram jnanam. Now, next he says, somebody pravicharya chiram jnanam muktoham iti manyate, who has a lot of jnana, having thought about all that jnana, he starts believing that he is liberated. Muktoham iti manyate. Then he asks, Kim asau mananadeva mukto bhavati tatshanat. Okay, he believes, he thinks to a lot of mananam and thinking over his jnanam that he is mukta. But from that mananam alone, does he become mukta in that instant itself? Kim asau mananadeva mukto bhavati tatshanat. So again, very interesting lines from various texts, bringing about the angle also brought out by this sutra and the bhashya, that it is these particular states coming from yoga, the yoga sampragnata, asampragnata samadhi and viveka khyati process, that one gets mukti, and all the various margas for different sadhakas qualified in different ways, and therefore different margas are suitable for them. Eventually it has to go through the funnel of yoga to culminate into mukti or liberation. So that is what the other context around this sutra that I wanted to give. Okay. So now, before starting on the next sutra, Vyasa has a slight small 2 lines of preamble. He says, Siddha bhavati viveka khyatihi hanopayah iti. Nacha siddhihi antarena sadhanam ityetad arabhyate. So the viveka khyati comes about. Viveka khyati gets attained. And that is the hanopaya. We have seen what is hanopaya. That is the means of hanam, the means to kaivalya or moksha. But this siddhi of viveka khyati, this attainment, does not, in general, a siddhi and attainment doesn't come about without sadhana, any sadhanam. So sadhanam means or tools or so on. So without a sadhanam, you don't get siddhi, and therefore Patanjali is starting with the next sutra, says Vyasa. And then comes the Sutra 2.28, which brings in the Ashtanga Yoga that is so famous and always talked about. And the Sutra 2.28 says, Yoganganushthanat ashuddhikshaye jnana deeptir aviveka khyate. Now this sutra is often quoted in classes and in different contexts, and therefore it's probably familiar to a lot of people. But the real import, hopefully, can be realized only after going through the text that we have done so far, up to Sutra 2.27. And now we understand when Vyasa says, Siddha bhavati viveka khyate hanopaya iti nacha siddhir antarena sadhanam ityetad arabhyate. So why is Patanjali bringing this at this point in the text? Why is he bringing it at all? And how the siddhi and the sadhanam is being related? And therefore this sutra is coming up, Yoganga Anushtanat, about the Yogangas, Yoganga Anushtanat ashuddhikshaye jnana deeptir aviveka khyate. So what does this sutra mean? So Yoganga Anushtanat, by doing an anushtanam. Anushtanam means establishing in line with what is being said, or inculcating what is being said in the Shastras. So the Yogangas that will be mentioned, by doing anushtanam of those, Yoganga Anushtanat, ashuddhikshaye, when the ashuddhis start, or the impurities start fading away and then finally get faded away, jnana deeptihi, the flame of jnana, the light of jnana, is aviveka khyate, goes up to viveka khyati. So in general, I'm thinking that people probably have heard this sutra, but now we can realize the importance of why aviveka khyate. Why is it important to point out that it is up to viveka khyati? Because at this stage we understand the importance of viveka khyati, and we see the direct relation between viveka khyati, bandha mukti, and moksha. And then we are seeing jnana deepti, how viveka khyati is of the nature of jnanam, and why this is known as jnana deepti, the light and the flame that puts the vasanas in the dagda bija state, the burnt seed state that we had seen. And why aviveka khyate brings out the power of the yogangas, because they can take you right up to viveka khyati, and why that is the ultimate state of jnanam, after which even that has to fade away. But that is the jnanasya koti, as we have heard in the first chapter. And therefore, why ashuddhikshaya is important for that? Because as we have seen, the chitta malam, which is nothing but avidya and the kleshas. And then we have seen tasya hetur avidya. What is the role of avidya and what part it plays in all of this? And why ashuddhikshaya is so important? Why jnana deepti up to viveka khyati is so important to reach kaivalya and moksha? And how the yoganga anushtanam can take us there? And why this sutra is therefore establishing yogangas by bringing about the aspect of ashuddhikshaya and aviveka khyati jnana deepti. So that is what the sutra 2.28 is.
So Vyasa, in his enunciation, says that viveka khyati has been described. Saptadha viveka khyati, pratabhumi prajna has been described. But siddha bhavati viveka khyati hanopaya iti nacha siddhi antarena sadhanam iti etad arabhate. See, if the viveka khyati has to be attained, we have to take recourse to means of viveka khyati. Now, without taking recourse to means of Viveka Khyati, where is the chance of attaining Viveka Khyati? So, he is now referring to sadhana, that is the means, usually taken as practices, because we all believe in practices of yoga. And that is why there is confusion in the word right in the beginning of this chapter, which was called sadhana pada, not sadhana pada. Sadhan is means. So you must first get hold of the means, handle the means, and then when you want to handle the means or handling the means itself, there is something which is called sadhana. So he mentions the means of Viveka Khyati. What are the means of Viveka Khyati? Because that is going to give the spiritual samam bonam, human spiritual samam bonam. That is going to result into that. That is going to result to moksha, kaivalya, nirvana. So he says yogangas anushthanat. Now this anushthan word cannot be really translated into any other language, particularly into English. So we will have to understand here that Patanjali is not mentioning, because we all believe practice of yoga. Yamas to be practiced, niyamas to be practiced, asana to be practiced, pranayam to be practiced. So we understand yoga as something as practices. However, the sutra is not yoganga bhyasat. So we should understand that will dispel our ignorance about, although if we don't understand what is anusthana, we'll have to understand what is really not anusthana. So yoganga bhyasat is not the sutra. He doesn't say yoganga bhyasat ashuddhikshaye. Because we all know that yoga is merely a practice. There is nothing beyond practice. So what is this? What is the word anusthana? So just how Srinivas explained you. See, we all are in karmas. Karma is going on incessantly. We are practicing karmas. We have to do karmas. We keep on doing karmas. Karmas are happening. But what is the difference between karma and karmanushthanam? So also dharma. We might be practicing dharma as far as our abilities, capacities, etc. are there. We might practice dharma. But dharma and dharmabhyas, karma, karmabhyas, that is not what is being mentioned here. It is anushtanam. So karma anushtanam is possible. It is a level of practice when it becomes karma anushtanam. Level of practice of dharma will become dharma anusthana. So anusthana word comes in few places. Karma anusthana, dharma anusthana, mantra anusthana, yoga anusthana. Now in anusthana, Srinivas explained you, it is inculcating, imbibing. And with that inculcation and whatever we imbibe, there is ethos created, a typical ethos created. So in the karma, we don't need ethos. Without ethos, we are doing our karmas moment to moment. Where is the ethos in each karma? For each karma, we don't require ethos. Incessant karmas are going on. Dharma also might be practiced. Morality, ethicality, etc., virtuosity may be practiced. So that will be merely a practice of virtuosity or practice of moral ethical principles. Anusthana brings much more, which really cannot be articulated. The word itself has its meaning, and therefore it has to be understood. So to tell you, to convey something, I can say there is ethos in it. There is a philosophical fabric in it. There is fabric of religiosity in it. And it has its own atmosphere. For karma, we don't need atmosphere. Without atmosphere, we are carrying out so many karmas. Without suitable atmosphere, many times under inclemencies, we are carrying out our karmas. But for Anusthana, all those things, the wavelengths of so many things should be matching. So it should become philosophical act, religious act, and there must be ethos of all that. And Anusthana has an ethos. Difference between karma and karma anusthana is that karma anusthana has an ethos. It takes into consideration so many things. Like in karma anusthana, in simple words, you can't be not taking bath and sit for anusthana. So you will do so many things. What is called a shaucha. Shaucha up to taking bath will be accomplished. Without that, you can't be sitting for anusthana. So it has that ethos, it has that kind of atmosphere created and entering into. You must enter into atmosphere for any anusthana. So it is not yoga abhyasa that do regular practice of yamas and niyamas and asana and pranayam. So that is very earlier part. It is something a part of run-up. I am not saying that is not needed. I am not saying that is being set aside. That is run-up. You will have to be on the run-up. But somewhere it should become anusthana at some stage. And the anusthana is going to give, anusthana is going to be means for viveka khyati. Yoga abhyas is not going to become means. But yoganga anushthan is going to become means. And when the means are adhered to, handled, carried out, managed, negotiated, etc., etc. The practices, when so negotiated, under influence, under gravity of that religiosity, if I may say so, which is not apt word, then that becomes anusthana. And that anusthana is only means. So we should know that Patanjali is not saying yoganga abhyasat ashuddhikshaye. So that's an ignorance within us which we have to set aside. So he says yoganga anusthanat. So what is anusthana has to be understood, and this anusthana, as I said, comes in few disciplines and realms such as karma anushthan, dharma anushthan, mantra anushthan, yoga anushthan. So it has set practices, set culture. It is set culture, not set of practices merely. So it has that ambience, ethos, atmosphere. Like we say, I should have good atmosphere to be doing particular thing. What is that atmosphere? So how far you can create atmosphere? You want to have an atmosphere. So Anushthan has such a wide range of meaning which should be understood as we evolve in our levels of yoga. Today at the outset I cannot tell you what is Anusthana, but as you start your yoga, as you graduate in your levels of yoga, somewhere you will know that there is something called as Anusthana, and then you will understand the nuances, implications of Anusthana. So that's why this word cannot be kept for inquiry right now, because we are dealing with a very, very primary, preliminary information about yoga. However, it should be borne in mind. Anusthana is something which has a greater radius. Abhyasa doesn't have greater radius. Abhyasa is to repeat the practice as what is not coming should be attained, what is coming should be refined more and more and more and more. By practice we refine. By practice we attain and we refine. So, let's keep this term open for inquiry. And this Anusthana works in two ways. Ashuddhikshaya, as just now Srinit said, the karma vasana, klesha vasana, jaiva vasana, the vasanas have to go away. As biological beings, we have these vasanas, tendencies of the flesh, to tendencies of the senses, to tendencies of the mind, to tendencies of the psyche. So many gravities are exercising forces on us, and therefore we are bound. Therefore we are bound. So those are all ashuddhis. Ultimately of the form of avidya or rajatama gunas. So rajatama gunas are causing the ashuddhi by way of avidya and its manifestations. So that has to dwindle. That is the purificatory act. So by Yoganga Anusthana, there will be purificatory act starting from first getting rid of grosser impurities, then subtler impurities, and then comes purity. You can't have impurity with you and still become pure. The first impurities have to go. Then you will be coming to purities, and then you will be going to piety, then you will be going to sanctities. So onwards to purity, in our idea of impurities and purities, there is much more. So that is one thing, and the other one is the flame of wisdom, because Viveka Khyati is a wisdom manifestation. So the Jnana Dipti, the flame of knowledge, will reach acme point to deliver the final effect of it, which is Viveka Khyati. Up to Viveka Khyati, the knowledge will come in a very well. So it will be sojourn to knowledge, in knowledge path. So you will get all sorts of knowledges which are needed for us, our evolvement, to refine our culture of practices. So Anushthan is a culture. It has a cultural fabric which is given by some metaphysics, philosophy, religion, ethos. So that's how the word Anusthana will slowly start. We'll get idea about it as we proceed in the path of yoga. Understand the core culture of yoga slowly and gradually. So when we proceed towards the core culture, we will get to understand yoga is something which is a matter for Anusthana and not just for practice. Practice will not give you perfection in yoga. We need to transcend the levels of those practices into some higher modes of practices which no longer remain as practices but become Anushthanam. So that is what we have to understand, that it is not Yogabhyasat or Yoganga Abhyasat Ashuddhi Kshaye, but Yoganga Anushthanat. That is why this is called, Ashtanga Yoga is called ethico-religious practices. In English, perhaps. In our present English, maybe there can be better expression for it, because religion is a very tainted word today. People want to keep that word away. They want to keep off. Because what we are facing out of so-called religion, we are developing some kind of apprehension, fear about it. But it is dharma, yoga dharma. Yoga dharma anushtanat. Yoga is a dharma. Yoga is not just a practice. Now dharma, again, not to take it as a religion. If you recall, we had discussed with it. What is the word dharma? Nishresa Abhyudaya. That which gives Nishresa Abhyudaya, which gives us ultimate state of human spiritual endeavor. That is dharma and not religion. So yoga is a dharma. And therefore there is anusthana in it. Anyway, the much I say, the more it will be confusing for you. But I just want to tell you what is to be underlined, that it is not Yoganga Abhyasat, but Yoganga Anushthanat. Slowly we will be getting to understand what is the radius of Anusthana, which is totally different than paltry radius of practices. Okay.
Okay. So we'll stop here for today, and next time we can continue with the bhashya of the Sutra 2.28. Yuganganushthanat Ashuddhikshe Jnanadiptiravivekhyatehe. So let's recite the shlokas and Guruji and end the session. Vaijñānikam pravaktritva आसनेषु कलाविदम् योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञम् वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.